Do we have
Happy to do it.
Do we have a cute flag graphic to accompany this?
Oh, yes. Do we? That's great. Are we ready, Roseanne? Oh, great. Chair, I'd be happy and honored to lead the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please proceed.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of
the United States of
America
and to the republic for which it
stands,
stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Time for a roll call. I am here. Is Harsh Patel here? Doesn't look like it. Joyita, you are here. Jade, you are here.
Yay.
Yay. Tanmay, I do not see unless masquerading as Milpitas IT. Daniel Sullivan, not present at the time. Don Watt, I believe Roseanne said that he had communicated non-attendance.
That is correct.
And Ranjith.
Hey, I'm here.
So considering that there are 3 of the regular members not present, I move that we seat Ranjith for this meeting.
Okay.
Do we have a motion to seat? Chair?
So moved. Do we have a second?
I second it.
Okay. Joyita?
Yeah.
Do you vote in favor?
I vote in favor.
Jade? It shows that you're muted, Jade.
Okay. Yeah, I second.
Okay, we've already had a second. So, and I will interpret that as a vote in the affirmative. I also vote affirmatively. Ranjith is seated for this meeting.
Okay.
Chair, I would just like to point out that Harsh Patel has joined the meeting.
Oh, okay. Good evening, Harsh.
Hello, hi, good evening. Sorry, I was late by a couple of minutes.
Yes. So the agenda was sent out by email. I hope that everyone has looked over it. Are there any questions or comments about the agenda? It's fairly brief. Hearing no comments, I will ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
I second that.
All opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the agenda is approved by acclamation.
Chair, can we do a roll call vote, please?
Okay, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Jade, yay or nay?
Yay.
Thank you. Joyita?
Yay.
Thank you. Ranjith?
Yay.
Thank you. Harsh?
Yay.
Thank you. Chair?
Yay.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 6 in the agenda, approval of the minutes. And we have 2 sets of minutes to approve. The first are the minutes from May. We did not get a second on a motion to approve the May minutes at our last meeting. Again, the minutes were sent out via email. Is there a motion to approve the May 26 minutes?
Motion to approve the May 26th approval of minutes.
Is there a second to this motion?
I second that.
Recording secretary, please call the roll.
Jade,
Yay.
thank you. Joyita,
Yay.
thank you. Harsh,
Yay.
thank you. Ranjit,
yay,
thank you. Chair,
Yay,
thank you.
the motion carries. Second item under approval of minutes are our most recent meeting in September. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes from our September meeting?
I move to approve the minutes of the September 16 meeting.
Is there a second to the motion?
I second it.
Will the secretary please call the roll and a vote for this motion?
Jade,
Yay.
thank you. Joyita,
Yay.
thank you. Harsh,
Yay.
thank you. Ranjit,
yay,
thank you. Chair,
Yay.
thank you.
Are there any members of the public in attendance?
I do not see any members of the public in attendance.
Okay. Under the agenda item of public forum, does anyone on the committee want to talk about anything that is not already on the agenda? At this time, does anybody have any agenda requests for our next meeting? Items you want to be put on the agenda for the next meeting? Hearing none, I will proceed on to item number 8. Review the fiscal year 2020 to 2021 revenues and confirm that the services recommended to be maintained with Measure F funding are in allowance, are an allowable expenditure consistent with Measure F. And at this time, can we put the report portion of the agenda on the screen? The analysis.
I can do that. Thanks for stop screen sharing there. So I've expanded it a little bit, Chair. This is the top of the report. Do you want me to go ahead and brief the committee on it?
Sure.
Okay, super. Hi, everyone. It's good seeing you again. There are 3 primary roles and duties of the committee. Tonight, we're focused on this portion here, where annually after each fiscal year end, we review the status of the program and services which were funded wholly or partly with proceeds from Measure F. So our fiscal year end is June 30th. We began receiving this new revenue in April because that's when it took effect. Well, let me correct that. It took effect in April, and the first cash receipt was really in June, July. So what you see in this report is 3 months worth, and it's implementation period. So it's a little bit lower than what we would get in an annual period, but it's about 3 months worth of revenue in the beginning of this new revenue source. And what we're going to show you is how we budgeted and how we spent this money. If you recall, when we put this report before you, when we launched the committee, we had a table very similar to this, and it was 6.3 million. We developed the budget usually in the early spring period, and that was when we were looking at various program cuts, programs that we were contemplating having to reduce because we had a budget shortfall. So when Measure F was approved by the voters, we felt that this table was representative of the services we were able to retain. So because April was very close to when we developed the budget for 21-22, this basically is a very similar table to what you saw earlier, but just a fraction of the revenue. And we feel that that's transparent, partly because between April, when the revenue came in, and our budget development for 21-22, the service offering was not much different, or the services we would have cut would not have been much different. So as you could see on the report there, we try to preserve 911 services. We try to preserve fire station services, recreation programs, our public works, internal functions that support the operations that directly impact our residents, economic development, neighborhood preservation, long-range planning, and additional library hours. So those are, in broad strokes, programs that were partially funded by Measure F. As you also saw in the email that I responded to by member Daniel Sullivan, to be transparent, and as the chair mentioned before, Measure F is a general tax. It was a general tax vote approved by the voter. So it's not a special tax where we would put this into a segregated fund. So these funds go into the general fund, and it's a part of the budget development process. And we balance our general fund budget with these new revenues. So one of the other roles I think is important for this committee is when we meet in March, because we meet quarterly, is to perhaps provide information that we could bring to council to determine in the annual development of the budget what areas of the city services we should really focus on as well. And mind you, the council is the one that determines how ultimately funds get appropriated, but we could bring some of this information to council during the budget study session. So I think with that, I'll stop sharing, Chair, and I'll turn it back to you and see if there's any questions from committee members.
Do you have the text of Measure F available to display?
I have it on the screen. And when you say the text, do you mean like the ordinance itself? Or the question that was asked in the ballot?
How about the question that was asked on the ballot, since that's—
Yep, I have that.
Was voted on.
And that's a question. Okay, yeah, so let me put that on the screen. I don't know if that's large enough. Is that font okay?
It's okay for me.
It is okay. Yeah.
Okay, super.
Okay, so one of the last items there is requiring independent audits.
Mm-hmm.
I have not seen an independent audit.
So it doesn't describe exactly what this independent audit means. So I'm going to expand on it. We have two types of audits as it relates to our city government, and it's very rigorous. One is the independent audit that we go through for every fiscal year end. We have a CPA firm that comes in, reviews our internal controls, pulls samples, and asks us to verify all of our revenue and expenditures, or a big selection of our revenue expenditures. So that happened for this fiscal year, and we passed with clean and very minimal remarks. So that's one set of independent audit. Another set of audits that I think is really important is the sales tax auditor, to make sure that businesses are reporting and that the city gets those funds. As a part of approving Measure F, the city also approved the consulting firm HDL, who does those audits on our behalf. So we have two frameworks. If this committee would like to see the CPA audit report, I'm happy to bring that before you in the March meeting, or I'm happy to send it by way of email to the committee as well.
But this language in terms of Measure F, specifically, implies, at least to me, and I think I'm being reasonable, that there is an audit of Measure F, the Measure F funds specifically, and presumably the Measure F funds expenditures as well.
Yeah, I like I said, this is a ballot question, and so we'd have to actually look at the ordinance, which is the legislative text.
Okay. So when we were asked to, I believe it was our first meeting, we were asked to approve the essentially yearly disbursement of funds from
Right.
Measure S, but based on the estimates.
Mhm.
And as I recall, that was a fairly close vote from the committee. I want to say it was 4-3 in favor. So it'd be wonderful if we could put this list of intended presented to the voter expenses with the line items in the analysis.
Oh, you want to compare the ballot question to the table?
Yes.
Okay.
And let me quickly ask, does anybody think that would be a waste of time? Any committee members?
I don't think so. I personally have a question. I mean, everything else really matched pretty good. I mean, if you read what the line item, except I just think I would appreciate some elaboration on this internal functions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth item, internal functions to effectively support other city departments. So,
Okay. Jade, I think we can, address that and address any other concerns if we can, be looking at both lists, simultaneously. I mean,
okay.
I have a printout of the list in front of me. So, but I think to just facilitate that everybody's looking at the same thing, if we could possibly do a split screen.
All right, let's see. I'm going to try my best. Okay.
You didn't know I was going to give you all these IT challenges, did you?
I know. Okay, so let me see here.
Just to make the meeting more lively.
Of course, of course. Okay, let's see. I have multiple monitors, so split screening can be a little challenging. So just give me a couple of minutes.
While
when you
we're
try
waiting
to
for this, Roseanne, did you hear anything from Daniel Sullivan regarding attendance at the meeting?
I did not.
Okay. I know he sent out a couple of emails indicating great interest in this topic, but it's unfortunately he's not in attendance.
All right, let's see if I'm successful. Okay. I might have been. How is that?
Okay, very good.
Okay, that's really good.
Success.
All right, Chair, back to you.
Thank you.
Of
I
course.
think I'll just read down these categories and ask if there's any questions or comments from the committee on them, and we can go off into a discussion if anybody wants to. The first one is respond to 911 calls within established parameters, resolve crime, dedicate staff to traffic safety, and practice community-oriented policing. So one of the items in the ballot description was 911 emergency response. I think that's at least included within this line item. You know, community-oriented policing is probably not really part of 911 response, but the next item is police and fire protection. You know, I don't really have any questions or issues with this line item. Does anybody else on the committee have questions or comments?
I'm good on that. I like that one.
Anyone else?
No, this looks good.
Okay. Fire stations to ensure 24/7 coverage across the city. That seems to be, much the same as the category of police and fire protection and 911 emergency response. It just appears that they're separating out police in the first line and fire in the second line. Are there any questions or comments from the committee on this?
Okay. I didn't realize that the fire stations across the city is not manned 24/7. And it takes extra funding to support that from Measure F. Am I making sense?
Does any of the city staff have a response to that comment?
Correct me if I'm mistaken, Deputy City Manager. Walter Rossman is on the call in the absence of our Assistant City Manager, Ashwini Kantak. This was Member Jade Hall. This is to retain 24/7 coverage. We had contemplating cutting potentially staff members that would have impacted our 24/7 coverage. But with funding such as Measure F and other resources, we are able to maintain that service level. So
that is correct, Walter Rossman. Sorry for not being online, because I actually just came from another meeting. Indeed, the intent was, if we would not have had Measure F funding, we would have browned out some stations. What that means is the station with lower call volumes would have been closed for 12 hours, and we would have stretched the response from the fire department over 3 stations versus 4.
Thank you for the explanation.
Sure.
Are there any other questions, comments, concerns, etc. from the committee on fire stations, the fire station item?
No.
No, you're good.
Okay, the third line item, services for aquatic, senior, and youth services. That's a somewhat confusing item. But it, at least to me, it does fit under youth, senior, and recreation services.
Is it for the Milpitas Community Center, the youth services? I know there is a senior center, but what is the youth services specifically for?
Sure, I can help out with this. So the youth services are classes, there are programs, there are teen center services, which provide to our teens. There are social services, which provide to them for if there are suicide issues, for suicide prevention. So it's a plethora of activities, sports center activities, which we have, which we offer to the youth in Milpitas.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any additional questions regarding this line item from the committee?
I'm good.
Moving on to the fourth line item then, services for parks, tree, and facility maintenance. So there is a description of repairing park equipment and maintaining parks and recreation centers. So certainly services for parks and trees and some facility maintenance, aligns with the ballot measure statement. I would ask what facilities are included in this.
I also want to add in this, I understand that Caltrans looks after our freeways, but when the city has enormous amount of trash lying around in public areas, who is responsible, and is this facility maintenance part of that? Like, for instance, right now on Calaveras Boulevard, there are like huge mounds of, there's just trash lying about. So is this part of that maintenance?
So our staff, city staff, that takes care of the streets and roads. That is correct. It depends. Calaveras Boulevard is the county street. I believe we maintain it for the county. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I can come back to the committee on that question. But it would be facilities in general, any kind of infrastructure the city owns, which is roads, buildings, parks.
So areas that the city owns.
Correct.
So when it is the road and adjoining to it, the freeway, just before you enter a freeway, the area, does that?
On the ramp.
Yeah, is that owned by the city or Caltrans?
No, that's Caltrans. Caltrans starts as soon as you enter the ramp, it's a Caltrans property.
And how about, if you're in school property, if you're seeing it in Milpitas district, school district?
So if the refuse or the trash is on school property, such as within the perimeter of the fencing of the school, then it's the school's responsibility.
No, if it's not inside the school, but it's next to the road, then
That
it's
would,
city?
that would be the city. Like I'm wondering, you're talking about the issue we are having by Calaveras beyond by the school district where the sports center is in the school district.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, there's an unhoused person right now, I believe. I learned from staff the other day. So we are working with the school district to address this issue right now.
I see. Okay. And I understand. So does this, the measure of money involved in cleaning these areas?
So as Lauren probably explained this, we fund Measure F, property tax, sales tax, all those various revenue sources help us to maintain the city services which are paid through the general fund. And so obviously Measure F funding allows us to maintain the same service level which we have enjoyed as a city for the last previous years. So Measure F definitely contributes to all kinds of funding as outlined in the memo.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you for your explanation.
Of course.
Are there any further questions on this line item? Okay, moving on to the fifth one. Internal functions to effectively support other city departments.
Yeah. Will the deputy city manager elaborate on that? Because I was just wondering what are these?
Sure, I'll
These
be happy.
functions that are covered by the budget already.
Sure, I'll be happy to explain this. So So let me step further. Let me step back for a moment. So in order for the police department to provide 911 services, the police department needs to hire police officers. They need to provide payroll services to the police officers. We need to provide data computers in their cars. So this is just as an example for the police department to be able to function effectively. They need support departments, human resources, finance for payroll, human resources for hiring and for benefits, finance for payroll, finance for accounting of the expenditures, and obviously IT, information technology, in order to maintain and purchase those computers. So hence, as an extension of providing all the services as outlined in Measure F, in terms of support departments need to be present as well and need to be funded. So that's our thought and why we include that as part of the Measure F funding schedule.
I think I'm a bit perplexed that all those functions that you mentioned, I know they are important, and that's what they can do to keep records and do their work efficiently. But why isn't that part of the department budget already?
Some cities do this in a rather complicated fashion. Sunnyvale will be actually one of them. I've worked there before, so that the police department funds the support in the IT, in the HR, and in the finance department, as an example. It's a rather complicated way of setting this up. So typically cities do what we do in Milpitas, where the support departments are independently funded in the general fund, but it's understood that they are supporting the other general fund departments. For instance, if this weren't a general fund issue, but it's what the water utility department, for instance, is charged an overhead rate to pay for the support departments to provide services. So that's how some cities set this up, with an overhead rate or with an overhead payment. But we chose not to do this traditionally for the last 50, 60 years. The city has been incorporated by general fund paying for the support departments, but recognizing those support departments, as you just mentioned, are very important in order for police, fire, parks, etc., to function as a department and provide services to the residents.
So let me see if I understand. Okay, so what you're telling me that within Milpitas City, you have support functions, and the support functions are kind of like citywide. You have IT support, and the IT support group will be available for all the different departments within the city, right? And
Yep,
then and the services they provide will be charged to, let's say, for the police to get all the IT services, to get their new computer functioning and stuff. They have to spend hours, and so they bill the police department. Is that how it goes?
So we don't do that directly. We just they are funded out of the general fund, and there's no billing mechanisms. If you think about if we were to do this, this would be administratively rather burdensome. Because now we would have to policemen would be invoiced by another department within the same fund, and in order to avoid this administrative burden and be more efficient, this doesn't happen. Those departments are funded out of the general fund directly, and with the recognition they're supporting the external departments, the front-facing departments, which provide direct services to the residents.
I guess I'm just surprised that would be using the small taxes that's collected from Measure F to help support that function.
Okay, well, let me turn this around a little bit differently. Maybe this will help the committee. If Measure F wouldn't have been there, would have not been approved by the voters, you would have less firefighters, less police officers, less people doing facility maintenance, maintaining our roads. And therefore, since you have less people who need to be payroll issued for, benefits provided for, computers being maintained, you would automatically reduce those internal service departments. Because you would have to, you can staff down, reduce number of people you have in finance, HR, and IT, because you have less people to support in the external serving departments. So hence the correlation. Does that help?
That's fine. That's fine. From this budget, it means you can only like at most 3 people, right? From the budget. Anyway, that's fine. I don't know if anybody else have any question.
Good question, Jade. Good question.
I would like some explanation about why the amount for the internal function support is identical to the funding for parks, trees, and facility maintenance. At least to my mind, they are not on the same priority level to the citizens of Milpitas. Yet the same support from this new tax is being provided to both of these line item functions.
As we mentioned previously, when we drafted up the $6.3 million memo for the full annual year's worth of sales tax measure revenue, we looked at various areas that we had to contemplate reducing. And while it may seem like it's not the same prioritization, we had to look at some low-hanging fruits and opportunities as we developed the budget. And so these funding areas and these cuts may not have been, nicely aligned with priorities, but they were areas we contemplated because they were probably easier cuts because they might have been vacant positions or programs that we could reduce contracts for.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee on the line item internal functions? We've had a lot of discussion on it. Anything else? Okay.
No, I'm good with it. I'm good. We can go on.
Moving on to the 6th row, support local business in their economic recovery, retain existing business, and attract new business. I'd really like to know what goes into this.
And I want to know why the number is so low for this. I feel
Sure.
we need more business and we need, it's a thriving city. We need to support local businesses a lot more. And I was just wondering why we are slating so little for this.
Sure, I'd be happy to provide some input or some more information. So the Economic Development Office of Economic Development, is a very small office, but it's very mighty. It may not, Director Andrade, it's right now we have 3 staff members budgeted for this of the general fund, and we have through ARPA dollars, the federal funds from the federal government, we are able to hire or fill another position for 2 years. So the reason why the amount is so small in the reduction, because if we were to take more, we would just pretty much eliminate this office and the function. We can't really afford that. As you just mentioned, Commissioner, the economic development is important for the city, but we want to maintain that service to our city and to our businesses.
I also want to share the function itself is a conduit of leveraging financing and partnership. A lot of what we do is to create pathways for economic development. So, for example, through ARPA program, like the Deputy City Manager said, we're going to put $1.5 million, $1.5 million of ARPA money that we receive locally into economic development. So on the Measure P side, there are a couple positions that we're contemplating we might have had to underfund or underfill or let go. But really the power and the empowerment of the economic development team is creating the network in our community and trying to leverage other funds such as ARPA. So I'm happy to share more about that if you like, but we are very focused on it. in a number of ways. So $1.5 million for small business grant, $300,000 for workforce training, another $500,000 for Main Street revitalization. So we have quite a bit of money coming from ARPA related to economic development. So we're trying to leverage our multiple sources.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Makes
Of course.
it clear. Thank you.
Of course, and I'm happy to share the report that was submitted to council on Tuesday as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any further discussion on support local business line item? Okay, nothing heard. Moving on. Row 7, neighborhood preservation and code enforcement. My first comment on this is this doesn't seem to correspond to any of the items on the ballot measure.
What is code enforcement? I'm not sure about that.
Code enforcement relates to various building code and violations, hazardous conditions via our fire marshal or other fire enforcement officers or building code enforcement officers. I don't know.
Adding
if
on
our
to-
deputy. Mhm.
Yeah, adding on what Lauren said, thank you, Lauren, that's great. So for instance, if you have a neighbor who parks their car, an old old car, which doesn't work anymore, in his yard, then you could call code enforcement and say, there's a code violation regarding blighted conditions in your neighborhood. If you have graffiti on a private property, which let's say Railroad Avenue, it happens to be there, code enforcement goes out, sends a letter to the private property owner and say, you have to remove the graffiti within 10 business days. So these are the various enforcement regulations, in addition to what Lauren was mentioning, where code enforcement comes in and ensures that the city has a proper, has no blighted conditions.
And neighborhood preservation, is this also falling under keeping neighborhoods clean or keeping neighborhoods safe? What is the, what are we looking at for that?
That's exactly it. It's keeping neighborhoods clean, keeping them safe. It's programs out of the police department for neighborhood watch. It is code enforcement. It is Beautify Milpitas program. All this goes in the broader sense of neighborhood preservation.
So this is essentially part of police enforcement also. So why is this not part of the first number 1 category? Why is it not separate?
Sure, very good question. So neighborhood code enforcement is out of the Building Safety Housing Department. Beautiful Milpitas is out of Recreation, Community Services, and Public Works departments. It's sort of an overarching services, several services provided by several departments under that theme of neighborhood preservation.
Okay. So how do we know how much is going to whom? I mean, how do you figure that one out? Since this is being kind of distributed in different different organizations.
As previously mentioned, when we developed our 21-22 budget, 2021 budget, that was when we had a very large deficit due to the pandemic, and we had contemplated various ways of balancing the budget. Some of it were positions that were filled, some of them were positions that were vacant, some of them were contracts which we knew we could reduce. So we had a list of different options, and so with the passage of the measure, we were able to preserve some of those services, and so that's how we created that first memo to the committee, that $6.3 million memo. Does that make sense? And then because we've only received a small portion of it in the first year, we just took a portion of that original $6.3 million. So a lot of this comes from our budget development. If we had not received Measure F, a lot of these services and this service level would have not been delivered to the community. because we would have cut positions, more positions, and reduced contracts and services.
Mm.
So Joyita, are you happy with the explanations? Or do you have more? We can spend a little bit more time on this if you feel it's necessary.
Yeah, I do feel that this one portion could be, you know, I feel that this shouldn't be a separate thing. It should be part of services for, facility maintenance and parks, and it should be part of the police. It shouldn't be another separate entity. That's what I feel, that it needn't have been a separate entity. But that's what I feel.
If I may give an example, I hope illustrates, and please staff, if I wander off into the weeds, correct me. But one item that code enforcement would address would be if your neighbor never cut their grass. That doesn't seem like a police action. You don't want a policeman coming out and threatening to arrest somebody for not cutting the grass. So that's at least one of the philosophical reasons why code enforcement is separate from police. It's more civil than criminal activity. Does that help?
Yeah, that I get that. Yeah.
And
Great example, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, weed abatement is a good example.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, who do you call? Who do you contact? What department?
You
For weed
contact code
abatement?
enforcement. Yeah, you contact
Mhm.
code enforcement, and they will refer this to the fire department because it's a fire issue, fire hazard, and then if the fire department goes out, contacts the county. See, that's how it works, and the county does it on behalf of the city. But it's a rather complicated way how we do things. But the county eventually handles it.
I see.
So if I
The
call a
county did
city
what-
hall, I ask for code enforcement, the switchboard knows who to contact me, connect me to.
Yes, you can do that. Or if you just put it into my Milpitas app, which I hope you all know about, you can put it into the app, and through the app, Public Works routes it to code enforcement.
Hey, I learned something. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't know about my Milpitas app. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, please download it Google Play or from your Apple Store.
Yeah.
And you can submit all kinds of requests, service requests to the city. It's not that we will be able to get to it the next day right away, but it goes into our work order program. And from there, staff will be dispatched accordingly.
Oh, I like this very much.
Yeah, me too.
I think we're going to get an uptick in service requests. Walter.
Wonderful, wonderful. And maybe
from
Sharon, you
these
can.
committee members.
Well, then we
Great.
have to up the budget.
I will offer that the last time I looked at the My Milpitas app, I did not like the permissions required, so I don't use it for that reason.
What permissions would you have to require?
It wanted access to just about everything.
I think
like,
you can deny them if you. Well, I'm actually not that close to it,
yeah.
but that's interesting. I'll look into that. Thank you, sir.
So are there any further questions about neighborhood preservation? Questions, comments, concerns? I'm sorry?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let us move on now to number 8, long-range planning and special projects. That is about as broad a statement as can be made. I would ask staff, first of all, if they can elaborate on that just a little bit, and then I'll call for questions and comments.
So this is really important because a city like us, in terms of good long-term community development, needs to have long-term plans, such as the Parks Master Plan, building permit updating, or the Metro District Plan. Those are examples of long-range planning. And so those are integral in our definition as a community when we think about neighborhoods, education, economic development, or even ensuring that we don't have urban sprawling for just general government support. So again, examples such as the Parks Master Plan that was approved Tuesday is an example of long-range planning.
Is there a separate department that does these? For example, I would imagine that the Parks Department does long-range planning for parks and recreation.
A lot of the long-range planning comes from engineering, building, housing, and planning. So the Parks Master Plan primary lead was the engineering director.
Okay.
And adding on what
In
Lauren
con-
was saying
in-
is,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, Lauren. So definitely correct what Lauren was mentioning. Planning is mostly important for our city. Has a lot to do with land use, how we zone our city, where we allow certain activities to be happening, industrial, residential, commercial. The general plan obviously is the overarching document for this. But in order to implement the general plan, you do a lot of ordinance changes, like zoning requirements or zoning ordinance changes. And lastly, what just happened with the state, you might know, follow this. The state approved SB 9, which is the splitting of lots of single family homes. We just had to go and do an urgency ordinance on Tuesday with the planning staff, which is fully general fund funded, mostly general fund funded, and in order to implement the statewide mandate or statewide law, which is effective next January. So it's a lot of legal work, ordinance work, in order to implement the planning function for the city.
Okay. My next comment on this would be, again, I do not see a statement in the measure F that seems to correlate with expenditures for long-range planning. Not disputing, the value of long-range planning, but I don't see it mentioned in the summary of measure F. Are there any?
Ballot text by law limits the number of words. If we had the pleasure, we would probably list a lot more services, but the law does not allow us. So if we look at the ballot question to ensure that it's a general tax, it's very important that we include language such as maintain the city's finances and services, comma, including. So the intent of the ballot language was to be illustrative, but not precise as an exhaustive list.
Can I suggest something for a special project?
Sure. I'll take the suggestion.
Can we figure out ways to plant more trees in the city?
Oh, actually, that's a part of our CIP project planning every year. We look because we have a tree urban plan, and we do put resources towards that. So be on the lookout as we develop our CIP budget and bring that forward. Yes, tree planting and replenishment is a part of our work program. And
I presumably some aspect of tree planting and tree maintenance, tree trimming would be covered under line item 4 as well.
Right. Line item 4, Chair, is that the parks, tree and facilities maintenance? Yes. One very critical function we were able to enhance is tree pruning, going from a 5-year cycle to a 4-year cycle. We have a very large tree inventory, and being able to do that improves just our tree health, but then also manages our risk.
I presume most of the tree inventory is street trees?
I don't know if that's a true statement, Walter. I believe we have neighborhood trees too, right? Early on, many decades ago, the city was really adamant about trees in the neighborhoods.
So it depends how we define street trees. If you mean the ones which are on your private property but city maintained, if you include those, then this would be the biggest group of street trees, of number of trees. The second largest one would be now parks.
I think starting in 1980, all the new developments, Sector 79, they like the city doesn't have any trees on the parking strips anymore. So it's mainly for the old neighborhood that the city have to maintain.
Lauren, is there a specific area that you are thinking of to create like a, more trees, like afforestation more, or just planting trees here and there in the city?
No, there's actually a tree urban plan. The deputy city manager would know, he oversees public works, but public works actually has a tree plan similar to our discussion on the line item above, which long range planning. We also have tree urban planning as well. And then that guides how we maintain and replenish and enhance and add to our tree inventory. So it's a part of implementing that plan. I don't know, Walter, if you want to add to that response.
You're right on. It's an urban forest plan, I think it's called, and the council adopted the plan about 3-4 years ago, and we're implementing it in order to increase the urban forest canopy, primarily as an action to address climate change.
Yeah, reduction of carbon print, and
That's correct.
All of
Yes.
that. Yeah, I would really like to see that happening in the city. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Of course.
And the last item in the description of services is additional library hours. I know the library is operated by the county. A number of years ago, the county reduced the hours of all the libraries. There was a great hue and cry, particularly from Milpitas, and the city dedicated some funds to keep Milpitas Library open more hours than the typical county library. I presume that this is to continue that funding.
Correct. We contract with the county to pay for extra hours for the benefit of our community. And that was an area we contemplated having to reduce if Measure F wasn't passed when we developed the budget.
And to add on to what Lauren is saying, it's 17 hours, which we're paying weekly, and it costs about $500,000 to $600,000.
This is very important. Yeah.
One of the items, in fact, I think the only item that's listed in Measure F that was not covered here, doesn't appear to be covered in our description of services, is natural disaster preparation. Where is that addressed in here?
Well, natural disaster preparation is a function of 911's, a function of public safety services. So I don't know if you want to consider it as a part of the first line item. These same individuals also participate in EOC, Emergency Operations Center. So currently right now during the COVID period for the last 18 months, we've had an active EOC. It's staffed primarily by fire and police who lead a lot of the discussion. So we don't call it out separately on line item 1. But it is an integral function of these public safety members of our staff.
Okay, we have discussed all 9 line items. Are there any further questions or comments before we call for a vote? Are there any members of the public that have joined us?
There are no members of the public.
Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to confirm that the services recommended be maintained are an allowable expenditure consistent with Measure F?
I so move, I can't. Yes, that we confirm that all these budget items are within the Measure F constraint.
Yeah, I second that.
Okay, will the recording secretary please call the roll and a vote for the motion?
Sure. Jade,
Yeah,
thank you. Joyita,
Yay.
thank you. Harsh,
Yay.
thank you. Ranjit,
Yes.
thank you. Chair,
Abstain. I believe the motion carries. That was item, what was it, 8? I've lost track.
Yes, 8.
So the next item on our agenda is any staff or liaison reports, including committee membership.
We shared with you, Chair, that the city staff and the city clerk's office dutifully noticed and advertised the opening. The next step is for the mayor to make a recommendation for the vacant commissioner seat that we have on this group. So that will be forthcoming at a future date. We have one carryover from the September, we have 2 from September and a few that carried over when this committee was first open. So I believe there's probably about 3 or 4 valid applicants if these individuals are still interested.
Any questions from the committee on the committee membership?
No questions.
Does the staff have anything else they'd like to say?
Not on the agenda, just happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays. Stay safe.
Yeah. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Thank you all for your attendance. And I guess that's it. That's it. We sit in front of our screens adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.